Welcome to this week's Reset for Life moment. I want you to help me out with something. I really need you to answer a question for me, okay? Here's the question. What's the worst thing that you have ever done? Perhaps you've stolen something, or maybe you've hurt somebody physically, or maybe you've had an extramarital affair. Maybe you've cheated on a test, or you've lied about something. I want you to just take a moment and look back on your life, all of those secrets, all of those different actions that nobody knew about, all of those thoughts that were really not very nice, and determine for yourself which one was the worst of them all. The chances are you will have a hard time doing that because none of us really wants to think that we are bad or that we're wrong about something. And that self-protectionism is really just wired into our DNA. So what we try to do instead, of course, is we try to compare our actions to somebody else's actions, and we say, well, at least I didn't do that. So let me ask you, what's the worst thing that you could actually have done? Maybe it's hurting a child, maybe it's a sexual assault or human trafficking. What about murder? Would you be capable of murder? The Old Testament has a huge list of things that God's people, the Israelites, were not supposed to do. Murder was one of those things. In fact, it's the 6th of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not murder. We still have that law today, of course, and for many of us, this is one of the most horrific crimes that a person could ever commit. It's easy for us to say that we really aren't that bad of a person because we've never actually murdered somebody. And yet in the New Testament, Jesus teaches us that it's really the issues of the heart that matter, not just the things that we do. In fact, in Matthew chapter 12, verse 35, he taught that good people do good things because they have good hearts, and evil people do evil things because they have evil hearts. So really, what goes on in the heart manifests in our actions. Here's the tie-in for today. John, who was one of Jesus' disciples, said this in 1 John chapter 3, verses 15 to 16. He says, anyone who hates their brother or sister is a murderer. And John says that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. This is how we know what love is, he says. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for others, for our other brothers and our sisters. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 12, verse 50, that anyone who does the will of God is a brother or sister. So this verse isn't limited to loving our own siblings only. What John is really contending for here is a unified, loving group of people who refuse to even hate one another. He's teaching us that if we have hate in our hearts, hate towards someone else, it's the same as murder. There's no justification here. There's no qualification here. There's no reason why we should even hate somebody else. The truth is God sees our hearts. He knows what's really going on inside. And if we harbor that kind of hatred, it's the same as if we have murdered that other person. So hating someone because of the color of their skin or hating someone because of how different they are from you should never be the part of a life of people who call themselves Christians. That kind of hatred in our hearts will keep us from heaven if left unchecked. It'll actually erode our relationship with God, and it will destroy our relationships with other people. That kind of hatred for the Christian is the same as actually murdering them. The opposite of hate, of course, is love. And John reminds us that we have been loved purely, we've been loved completely, we've been loved unconditionally by Jesus. He literally gave his own life for us. That's how much he loved us. And so John tells us that we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters also. This comes back to that great biblical truth in Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, which says, freely you have received, freely give. You and I have been loved to death, and so we ought to love to death. In this current climate of racial tension, and by the way, yes, there is still racial tension that is happening, even though you don't see it much on TV anymore. In this current climate of racial tension, we need to be people who do life differently. We need to be people who support and love one another no matter what they are facing. We need to come alongside them and choose to do life together. Choose to empathize and minister with them in their moment of greatest need. If your brother or your sister needs loving because they're hurting, then no matter what, love them. Give them support, give them care, talk with them, understand them, humble yourself before them, and be there for them. And you can do all of that, and I can do all of that because we have been loved and supported by Christ, who literally loved us to death. Friends, let's love for our sakes so that we don't have to harbor hatred and miss out on eternal life. Let's love others for their sakes so that they know that they are not alone in their moment of need. And no matter what someone else is going through, the Christian reaches out with compassion and care. They don't let their personal feelings get in the way. Truth is, Jesus didn't. He submitted to the cross, that cruel Roman instrument of torture and that cruel Roman instrument of death, and he did so because he loved us. The question I have for you is this: what are you willing to go through to prove your love for someone else? I challenge you to give them the same love that you have been given. That's my Reset for Life word for today. Don't forget that Durham Region is now requiring face masks to be worn in all public buildings. And as such, we are requiring that you wear a face mask when you come to church this coming Sunday. We hope that you'll help us by complying with that. Have a great week, friends. God bless.